Just under a year ago, I was teaching the introductory seminar on a sustainability module, and I played the class a video of a speech to the European Parliament by Greta Thunberg, the Swedish environmental activist. The speech was an impassioned call to action, an impassioned call for policymakers to listen to what climate scientists are saying. At the end of the talk, I asked the students, out of interest, if they had heard of Greta Thunberg before. 1 or 2 hands went up, but the majority stayed down. I don't believe I would have that same response if I asked again this year. We're lucky in 2019, at the end of 2019, to live at a time when awareness of climate change appears to be at an all-time high. And that is because of things like Greta Thunberg and the school strikes, Extinction Rebellion here in the UK, and media coverage of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's special reports on 1.5 degrees warming. And that 1.5 degree warming report from the IPCC gave us a very stark message about the need for urgency. This graph from Google Trends shows a record of what people have been searching for in the UK over the past 2 years. And you can see there is a definite uptick in searches for climate change, for Greta Thunberg, and for Extinction Rebellion. Proof that getting things into the media works. Just in the last 2 weeks, we've had reports issued by the World Meteorological Organization, and this week by the United Nations Environment Programme, telling us that although governments globally appear to be aware of the issue, we're still a long way behind on the action that needs to be taken. Why is this the case? Why are we aware that there's an issue, but we drag our feet about taking action? Environmental psychologists, human geographers, and sociologists have been researching the gap between attitudes and behaviour in relation to the environment for decades. And they found that one of the major issues is the way that we perceive risk. To assess a risk properly, 3 things need to happen. Firstly, we need to detect a problem. Secondly, we need to be able to interpret it as a problem. And thirdly, we need to accept and take responsibility for taking action on the problem. The issue with climate change is that a lot of what we're seeing is stuff that we have no prior experience of. So it becomes quite hard to detect the risk or to interpret what we're seeing as a risk. We all use mental shortcuts known as heuristics to simplify our response to the information that we receive. And one of these, the availability heuristic, means that if we don't have a point of comparison from our past lived experience, it can be very difficult for us to interpret a risk properly. It's also very complicated for most of us as individuals to understand whether the things that we are seeing in the world, extreme weather events, are actually the result of climate change or whether there's another factor at play. So we have this phenomenon called attributional ambiguity. There may be different causative factors of which climate change is one. And it's hard to quantify how much of it is climate change, especially if you're not a meteorologist. We can build a psychological distance between ourselves and the impacts of climate change. We might think that climate change is impacting people who live very, very far away from us on the other side of the planet. Or we might think that climate change is impacting people who will live a long time in the future. We tend to have an optimism bias, a belief that even if there is a problem, it will turn out okay for us personally. And finally, we might just be very averse to the solution. We might think that if we don't like the sacrifices that we have to take, we won't want to take action to deal with the problem properly. So where do creative arts come into this? The UK-based charity Climate Outreach published a book in 2017 in which they set out a number of principles for talking to the public about climate change. Their third principle particularly resonated with me. That is that people find stories much more engaging and relatable than scientific facts. It's kind of a no-brainer. It makes sense to us if we think about it. We can relate to other people's experience more than we can relate to cold data and facts. And we've begun to see a tremendous outpouring of climate-related art. We've already heard from Louise and from Catherine how sustainability thinking can lead to innovations in the fashion industry. But fashion designers have also been inspired by climate stories. So two very high-profile examples. Vivienne Westwood has designed many collections that incorporate climate protest. And my personal favourite, Alexander McQueen's final collection, Plato's Atlantis, was inspired by a vision of a climate-changed world. In popular music, Anoni calls out our slowness to act on climate change, our ambivalence to the idea it's only 4 degrees of warming, so what? While Childish Gambino spells out on the track Feels Like Summer, spells out the coming environmental crisis, warning us it's about to go down. Across the world, visual artists, dancers, designers, filmmakers, architects, sculptors, playwrights, poets, rappers and writers embracing stories about climate change and producing powerful art about the issue that is one of the most emotive and engaging ways of inspiring action. At this point in time, there's far too much out there for me to begin to list or even to comprehend how much there is. But there are online communities appearing that give us hubs for beginning to negotiate creative responses to climate change. This one, Climate Cultures, was founded in the UK in 2017 by Mark Goldthorpe. It currently has just shy of 150 members. The members are artists, they are academics, they are writers. It shares blog posts from the membership. It highlights events that are coming up, exhibitions, plays, and issues a regular newsletter. It's free to sign up, so do climatecultures.net. Over the past 2 years, I have been working with colleagues here at Bath Spa, investigating the power of theatre as a medium to engage audiences with climate change. There is a vast body now of theatre available for anyone who wants to go and see a play or read a script about climate change. The website artistsandclimatechange.com currently lists 150 plays, everything from puppetry to musicals to monologues that have been performed globally. And that list is bound to be far from exhaustive. One of the more ambitious initiatives, Climate Change Theatre Action, was established in 2015. Every other year in the autumn, they commission 55-minute plays from playwrights around the world, and they then perform them or organise performances of them in a similar fashion to how TEDx is organised, independently but sponsored by TED. They organise these shows, and the current programme is going on until December this year. There are performances yet to come in Austria, Australia, Canada, Germany, and the United States. Our own project here at Bath Spa has been a play called The Last Hurrah and the Long Haul. This tells a story of how climate change disrupts a very small, close-knit community. It was developed by geography students and acting students, collaborating together with myself and the director Rue Lowe, a lecturer in acting here. It's chaotic, it's comic, but it's also poignant. And the overall aim is to make a very vast, epic story, bring it down to a human level and make it more engaging. But it is not just audiences listeners, readers who are engaged and affected by climate change art. The process of creating climate change art impacts the creator as well. And with my colleague Siobhan Corbin, we have been interviewing the actors involved in creating The Last Hurrah, most of whom admitted that before going into the project they didn't have that much awareness about climate change. They certainly didn't have very much formal education about climate change. But they have reported to us that being involved in this project has made the story much more human to them. It has enabled them to see news about climate change through a new prism that makes it more relatable to them. And it's begun to inspire behaviour change in them as well. Climate art of all kinds, has a very important role in helping people to process what we are hearing about climate change and hopefully to begin to perceive the risks more thoroughly. Greta Thunberg calls for policymakers to listen to what climate scientists are saying, and she is absolutely right to do so. But perhaps also, if policymakers would listen to informed climate artists, it may help them fully appreciate the message. Thank you very much.